Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Antuan Magic Raimone. As author of Becoming Magic, TEDx speaker, actor, soldier of love, Antuan Magic Raimone has more than 20 years of professional experience in musical theater. He was most recently the first male universal swing for the 5 U.S. companies of Hamilton. A sexual violence survivor, he is on the advisory council for the Office of Victim Services of New York, has given several keynote addresses, been a panel member for the Men's Sexual Assault Summit, and has spoken at the United States Merchant Marine Academy. As Soldier of Love, he is a champion of light, love, and joy for others. His passion and purpose are to empower people to live a whole life. One where mistakes can exist, where fear isn't debilitating, and where vulnerability is not a weakness. Please join me in welcoming Antuan Magic Raimone. Welcome,
Thanks,
Antuan.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here. So, Antuan, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we like to start at the beginning. So tell us about the early years and how those may or may not have been formative in terms of how you came to be in the world of musical theater and the things that you're also doing today.
I grew up in a small suburb of Missouri near Kansas City. The suburb is named Blue Springs. And it's a his and hers situation for siblings. Both of my parents were married once before and had 2 children with their first spouses. Then they met, and I am the only child of my mother and father. And all of those siblings are 12 to 14 years older than me. So I'm the baby of the whole bunch.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I grew up with my mother's 2 daughters in the house. And she was mostly a single parent. She worked for the Department of Agriculture, but my father worked for Liberty Memorial in Kansas City, which was I want to say World War I or World War II memorial. My interest in working into theater did not come specifically from my parents. My father, he loved music. Actually, he was a DJ and had thousands of vinyls growing up, when I was growing up. And so, I grew up listening to R&B, soul. My 2 sisters, they were singers and they danced when they were younger, but took one of them still stayed in the entertainment out of high school. She was a model and went to Europe to model. And then in the 90s, she really worked hard to get into the music industry with several different girl groups that didn't quite take off to the degree she hoped they would. And so then she got into hospitality. My other sister went right into the Navy out of high school. And she did want to be a performer. She was a singer. She competed and made her way into a national competition, which would take her to Washington, D.C. And she had horrible nerves and stage fright and opted to not go to that competition. And that was the end of her singing experience in her life. And she still regrets that. But she said to me openly with so much love that the life that I'm living is the one that she wanted to live. So it's been really nice for her to experience that through me and with me also.
Does your mother sing?
She does sing in church choir, but that's the extent of her desire to sing. But
I'm just curious because both of your sisters sing. So I wondered if they got, the vocal chops from your mother or.
I guess we do. Yeah. But interestingly enough, before I got into musical theater, I studied Taekwondo for 4 years, earning my black belt within 2 years. So Jean-Claude Van Damme was a huge influence for me. There was also a movie in the late 80s, early 90s called Three Ninjas, of three brothers who their grandfather studied karate and he taught them karate and they loved it. And so I wanted to be not only I was intrigued by martial arts, but then I also wanted to be a kid doing martial arts in movies because of those movies.
Really?
Yeah. Even like the Goonies, those movies with kids as the leads in them. I was like, oh, that looks like so much fun.
So how old were you when you were studying and getting your black belt?
I started at the age of 9 or 10. Yeah. I had two interests at that time, Taekwondo or gymnastics.
Oh, interesting.
My mother said she would only pay for one. And I was just old enough to know that you could really get hurt in gymnastics. And also everything I saw boys doing in gymnastics required a lot of upper body strength. And I did not have that. And I was like, I don't think that's going to be for me. And so
you knew that even at that age?
Yeah, I was a very, very skinny little boy.
Huh.
And I just thought, I can't see me holding myself up on rings or a parallel bar or a high bar. And we found a Taekwondo studio in our town and we went and watched a class. And at the end of the class, the instructor said, are you flexible? Can you do the splits? And I said, yes, because I was naturally flexible. When I started, I was going probably 3 times a week. And then just seeing my potential, he, knowing that my mother was a single parent, offered me a scholarship that allowed me to study as much as I wanted, and my mother could still pay the same rate as she was already paying. So with nothing else to do, I was studying 5 nights a week.
Wow.
And competing, and we would drive to different towns across Missouri, competing with other kids that were in the studio and competing against other schools that were across the city and state. And I went to 2 or 3 junior Olympics and competed at a national level. And ultimately I got burnt out.
Yeah.
I got burnt out. It wasn't fun anymore. And I just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And at that time.
So your vision of the movies at that point was long gone. I mean, you were swept up probably under the pressure. I've heard other people talk about this when they were being kind of groomed along that sort of Olympic route at a young age and really feeling the weight of that pressure.
Definitely, because when I decided I wanted to stop, I was scared most to tell my mom.
Oh.
And to my surprise, she said, okay, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it, but you have to tell your instructor. And then I was like, oh, I thought telling her was scary. And it wasn't so much that I was scared of disappointing either one of them.
Yeah.
Because my instructor had made it a point of saying, this was 94. And there were whispers that Taekwondo would become an Olympic sport in 2000. Which it eventually did. And he really saw me being one of the students that could compete at that level. And at that age, I thought, 2000, this is 94, like 6 years?
6 years, that's a lifetime.
It's like, no way. And he like, please, and he bartered everything he could. You could only come once a week, only twice a week, or you don't have to compete as much.
Oh, so he was trying to ease the pressure.
Yeah. And I just knew, I was like, nope, I know this isn't something that I want to keep doing, because it also, at that point, I didn't see what I had learned in martial arts really translating to me being in movies and film, because I lived in small town Missouri. I didn't know anyone that was acting in movies from Missouri.
Yeah. So you still had your sights set on acting then too?
Some sort of, yes, absolutely. I hadn't considered musical theater. I hadn't strongly considered it because the musicals that I grew up watching, I never saw myself represented in the way that I wanted to be represented. I was watching Carousel, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, all of those. And I just didn't see people of color. I didn't.
Right. Well, they weren't.
Exactly. And so I didn't see that as a possibility. What I did see, though, were the music videos I was watching on MTV and all of those channels. And so then the next kind of interest for me was I wanted to be a backup dancer for Janet Jackson. And again, having no idea how that would happen, I would get to that place. But I just thought, that would be fun. And I wasn't necessarily taking steps in that direction. But when I got to high school was when I did my first musical. I had been singing in church choir since I was a little boy. And then middle school was the first time I was in school choir. And then I continued that in high school. And the theater teacher at my high school put together a big musical every spring. And that was when I realized all of these things that I can do and really enjoy doing exists in the space of musical theater. I don't have to decide I'm only a dancer in music videos or I'm only acting in film or TV. I can perform all these things in musical theater. And so
I just want to go back for a moment to quitting, Taekwondo.
mm-hmm.
I think there's something to be said for having that presence within yourself to be able to say to your mother, to your instructor at that age, you were what, maybe about 13 when you
13,
decided?
Yeah, 13, maybe 14.
Yeah. And you had achieved a high level. You said you made black belt. But you were being true to yourself by saying, no, it's not even a matter of going down to 1 day a week or 2 days a week. I'm solid with this. I need to do something else. And you had your sights set on some other things and you gave yourself a chance to explore some of those other things. And it sounds like, thinking about like being a backup dancer for Janet Jackson and starting to almost identify as a dancer in some ways. Were you watching videos and trying to do some moves? Were you trying to take classes or just practicing on your own, with a fake microphone in front of the mirror at home? Or like, I'm just curious, like, how did you start to take on that identity?
A lot of it was watching music videos and learning the choreography as I watched it. It still never occurred to me to take dance lessons at a younger age because I didn't know anyone that was doing that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have any reference of like, where could I go to take dance? That wouldn't come until my junior year of high school. I had been doing the musicals, and then going into my senior year of high school, it was announced that the musical was going to be Crazy for You. And I have a very, very strong and developed memory and ability to pick up choreography from watching. And that came from watching music videos over and over again as a kid. And so I could watch the style of jazz or the style of ballet and mimic what I was seeing. And it looked like I actually had the training for it, but I didn't know, I wasn't doing that. That's just what I knew to do. But when it came to tap, I could hear the rhythms and I could repeat the rhythm to you. But if you needed me to repeat it in the exact steps, that I didn't know how to do because I didn't know how to do the steps. So that's what took me into formal dance training, was to learn the technique of tap. So because I'm with the hopes of being cast as the lead in Crazy for You at my high school, which did not happen and was the first of two major devastations for me. Because it was a reality call that just because you might be the most talented person doesn't mean you will be hired or put in the position. And quite honestly, what it boils down to is, for a little Black boy in a suburb of Missouri, you're not going to play the lead in a musical that has only been cast with white men or white people. So even though I was the best dancer in it, I wasn't going to be the lead for Crazy for You. But I didn't know that until it happened, or didn't happen rather.
And when it didn't happen, did you see that as, how did you view that situation?
I just felt it was unfair. I cried. I was very upset about it. I told my mom. And I said, I'm some other random character that I didn't even know was in the movie. And I don't even know what that means. And my theater teacher called me either that same day that the cast list came out or maybe the next day. And she then went on to explain that the character I'd be playing would have a dance solo along with another female classmate of mine in the show. So it did soften it a bit, but it was still very incredibly disappointing.
Yeah. Interesting. Huh. Wow. So what was the second?
That happened in college.
Oh.
And it was my junior year.
Another junior year thing.
Yes.
Wow. I think you should have just skipped junior year.
And the musical was Oklahoma. So there's two men and a woman, and it's a love triangle that occurs in the show. And then there's this dream sequence where there are dance counterparts to those leads of the show. And it's always been cast that in that dream ballet, the leads who you've been watching, they are not a part of the dance ballet. Like it's purposely cast with other people. Uh-huh. And so I auditioned, and, you know, I was a musical theater major, and I was like, okay, well, I'm obviously going to be one of these two characters. And again, I was not, because I went to college in Springfield, Missouri, which is a very rural area of Missouri, in the Bible Belt. And not even that religion had anything to do with it, but just the geographic location. It was a copy of where I grew up. And it was many of my friends who were seniors. It was their final show. So it was the last show that I would do with them. And I was not disappointed. I was pissed and very angry, and had a very nasty attitude at the beginning of rehearsals. And it wasn't that I was saying anything to people, but just the way I felt about it was nasty.
Yeah.
And so I remember they were freshmen. It was their first show, and they were so excited. And in their joy, I realized just how bitter I was being. And then I felt ashamed of myself. And I also went up and apologized to some of those students and saying, hey, I just want to apologize for my attitude. But with that, I also made a promise to myself that any other show that I did through the rest of my life, if I was not genuinely interested or connected to it, I would not say yes. It didn't matter the amount of money. It didn't matter what the opportunity might be. If there was a piece of me that had any hesitation about saying yes to it, I would say no.
So that was a real turning point for you.
It really was, definitely.
Yeah. And were you able to keep that promise to yourself?
Yes, I have. I've never taken a job I didn't want. When I first moved to New York, I talked myself out of my instincts. Like there are certain red flags that kept presenting themselves, but I kept ignoring my instinct about what it was. And then by the time the signs were clear, at that point, it was too late. It's like, okay, well, let's just get through this and make this happen, and don't ignore my instincts again.
Well, it's understandable that I think a lot of people do that, right? Yeah. They ignore their instincts and they push through something thinking, oh, I'm being too picky, or I'm being too much of something, right? When in fact, you're actually being intuitive.
Yes.
Right? And we do tend to not. That's why I call this work from the inside out, because if we would listen to that inside, that intuitive piece, it usually takes us to the place we need to go.
Very true.
Right. And yet when we're younger, especially, although I think people of all ages often ignore their intuition, And it's not till afterwards that they realize, I should have listened. I could have had a V8. Right? But I think it's true. We often do that. So it sounds like, I mean, I'd say from a pretty young age, you flagged that for yourself. It sounds like.
Yes. Short answer, yes.
So you have something you can thank yourself for. And so did you go to New York right from college?
No, I did not. I went back home and did a show there. I did Smokey Joe's Cafe back in Kansas City. I loved that show. It was so much fun to do. And then that was in the summer after I graduated. Then that fall, I worked at Hershey Park. Oh, sorry. No. Wow, what's the sequence of this? Smokey Joe's was in the spring. Hershey Park was in the summer. And then that fall, I started working on cruise ships. And I would do that for 2 years, 2 years total.
Oh, wow. Oh, boy.
And then I would move to New York. So it would be almost like 2.5 years from when I graduated college before I'd moved to New York.
Yeah. I mean, what's remarkable, what I'm hearing here is, you have been in a profession that, from the outside looking in it's not an easy profession to make a living at.
Correct. And
it sounds like, and I'm making a few assumptions here, so you can correct me, but for the most part, most of your working life, you've been able to earn a living doing this. And it sounds like, you've worked your network, so to speak, or developed relationships with people. And I also, my sense is, based on what you're saying, you've stayed open to what's possible, even though you promised yourself you were not going to take anything that didn't feel connected enough to you. You were open to quite a few things, that you were willing to be connected to a number of different things. And so it sounds like things, you were open to being on a cruise ship. You were open to being, in a theme park. It wasn't just like, I'm only going to work in the theater. You must have had just, I'm guessing, and still do, an innate love for the craft and the art of what you were doing, to do it in lots of different settings. Am I right, or?
You are. You're spot on. And I want to speak to something you said about like working my network. And a lot of my early career, I would say with no shame or judgment that I was very naive. And also with meaning, I didn't know what someone might consider like a good job or whatever. I had no filter for that. And also, because I knew I loved doing it, the people that were around me, my teachers, other choreographers I would work with, directors, whomever those adults were, they saw the passion that I had, and they also saw how I worked. And they probably knew sooner than I did that where I was not where I was going to stay. And I never had a conversation with any educator or any professional and saying, I don't want to stay in Missouri, or that wasn't a conversation I even had with myself.
Really?
No.
It wasn't like, I can't wait to get out of here and get to New York or LA or something.
Not really. I mean, I knew I would eventually leave Missouri, but it wasn't. But for me, it was there were certain steps. Like there was a comfort. Like I had, like my first comfort was going 3 hours away to college, because then I could start to discover like who I was and start that also gave me freedom to understand like my sexuality. That was a big part of that. And also I had great examples from my sisters. One graduated high school, went to Europe to model. The second graduated high school, went into the Navy. And also watching my mother's response to both of them leaving, which was not, where are you going? Why are you leaving? What is happening? It was, okay, just make sure you can take care of yourself and be safe. Like I never sensed that my mother was heartbroken that her children were leaving, like truly leaving the nest. So when I expressed interest in theater, she was like, it's very difficult. It's very hard. I don't know what that business or that career is. I can't really help you. I just want you to be able to take care of yourself and to not do anything that you don't feel safe or right doing. Those were really the only guidelines or restrictions, if you even want to call them that my mother gave to me.
Wow.
Everything else was support.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really was.
I don't hear that usually from people when they talk about the messages they got from their parents.
Mm-hmm. And for her, when I was in high school, there was an experience right before I got hired to do this children's show called Schoolhouse Rock Live. I was in the kids' chorus doing a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at this outdoor theater in Kansas City named Starlight. And we're rehearsing outdoors. It was covered, but there were no walls. So the humidity is high in Missouri. Like,
yeah,
it is nasty.
You're in your high school years, or?
Yes, I was a sophomore, junior. And my mother showed up to pick me up from rehearsal. And we're riding home and she's like, how's rehearsal today? And I was just beaming and just electric and so excited. And she's like, you're happy dancing 8 hours in this heat and humidity? And I was like, yes. And she's like, wow. And she said for her, that's when she understood that I was serious about this. And then she had a conversation with the music director who was working on Schoolhouse Rock Live, and then mentioned to her, I think Antuan would be really great for the show. I would like for him to audition. I understand like you're his mother. Is that something that you would allow him to do? And she was like, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, my mom understanding the importance of it for me, in a sense, gave her enough, I guess, security that okay, like she saw my talent, but I think she was also getting confirmation from these other people, these other people that she's having happenstance conversations with.
Yeah, she sounds like a special person.
She is.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So after a couple of years on cruise ships, is that when you landed in New York? And that must have been, had you been in New York at all before that?
Twice, one on a school trip in college, and the second time was shortly after I graduated. The musical Aida was running on Broadway, and I knew they were having auditions, and I was very curious to see how I would kind of square up in an actual New York audition. And so I came to New York for a weekend, or some number of days, and went to the audition. And it was a very valuable lesson for me. So there were, I don't know, probably 100 men that day. And I knew I could pick up the material quickly. I knew I could do it well. And as they were making cuts saying, could this person please stay? Could this person please stay? So they only called your name if they wanted you to stay. If they didn't call your name, you knew you were done for the day. I did not hear my name, but what I did was I was actually watching and looking and seeing who they were keeping. And me, freshly graduated out of college, probably weighed 115 pounds soaking wet, looking around at these men that were, probably, if they were in their 20s, they were also, like, their build was much different. I have a very lean and slender build. And I thought, okay, I get it. I see what they're keeping. I don't look like that. And I'm not going to look like that. I don't think it's so much that I'm not capable of doing what they're doing, because I know I am. I was like, but I don't fit the physical look they're looking. And that was okay for me. It's like, that's okay. I can't control that.
Right. Yeah. So wow, you really could make peace with that in that way. Yeah.
And I think that was probably the beginning of me understanding and creating a healthy mindset around auditions, because I know auditions for performers, I think there's very little gray. And most people that I talk to about auditions can't stand auditions. I don't so much mind them, because for me, it's an opportunity to show what I can do to a person who doesn't know what I can do.
Right.
And I'm confident in what I can do. And if that's what you're looking for, then you're going to hire me. If it's not what you're looking for, you're not going to hire me. And I also understand that there are so few things that I have control of when I go into an audition, and all the other things aren't worth my frustration, anxiety, and energy. And that's something that I have told innumerable students that I've done workshops with, is like, understand there's a whole list of things that they will have. Are you filling a costume that exists? Because if so, you have to be the body type that's already in the costumes if they're not making new costumes.
Right.
You look like someone that they like. Do you remind them of someone they hate? Like, it's just, there's so many things that we can't control. And that goes for any situation.
That's right.
In life.
Wow.
Or career.
I applaud that, though, because I think that there are some people, it could take a whole lifetime to realize some of those things in so many contexts, right? Mm-hmm. It kind of comes under the category of, it's not personal, it's just business, kind of thing. And when you realize that, and you can just kind of square that away for yourself, it really frees you up to just show up fully, really.
It does.
And I can imagine too that if you showed up for an audition, even if it wasn't something you got, you could show up in front of people who knows, maybe down the road you'd audition for them again another time, and they remembered you, right? And they remembered you being, just well behaved at the previous audition or something, or because I'm sure there are people who misbehave at these things, right?
Oh yeah, I have a story for that.
So it's I can only imagine what you've seen. But so,
and one more thing I'd like to say to that is, I also set for myself, as long as when I leave that audition, I am confident and comfortable with what I did. Yes. The outcome, I'm not waiting for the outcome. If I leave the audition and think, oh, I wasn't as prepared, or I could have done this differently, then okay, let's work on that and not make the same choice or mistake the next time. But ultimately, for me, it was a matter of, that was a good audition. Either I hear something or I won't. And I'm not going to spend the next day or two or however long spinning out about that. Whereas a lot of people do, they like, oh, hey, have you heard anything? Or did you, or I've heard they're casting and they've been making calls. And it's like, I don't think about that. If it's meant for me, it will come to me. And if it's not, then I move to the next thing. So I know that, and this wasn't in your bio, but I know that you were also in the Heights, and then of course in Hamilton, that little show. And did you feel just as
okay with that too? Or were you maybe a little more hung up on that one?
For both
I don't know at what stage though. I mean, you just recently stepped away from Hamilton. So you were working there for 5 years. Am I right about that?
Yes.
And so, and In the Heights, when it first came out, wasn't as big a deal. It became a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But Lin-Manuel Miranda, has, of course, his profile has just exploded over this time, right?
Right.
And so I'm just curious, like, how did you contain yourself over that one when you auditioned?
For Hamilton specifically?
Yeah, or anything that had anything to do with him, because I can imagine that. I mean, I'm not saying you auditioned directly for him. I don't know if you did or not, but I'm sure there were lots of other people involved. But because of the profile of a show like that, right? And I know you've been in other high profile shows as well, but by the time you auditioned for Hamilton, it was already getting a lot of attention. Am I right?
Yes, it was. It had been on Broadway for a year before I auditioned for it for my first time. Well, the only time I auditioned for it. And
so it's like saying I passed the bar exam the first time.
Humble brag. Yes. Oh man, that's good. That's a great call out. Thank you for that one.
Yes, I went to Harvard. Yeah.
Well, I knew several people in the show. Many of them had done In the Heights, either on Broadway or a first national tour. I had worked with a few different generations of In the Heights. And the first time I saw Hamilton, the show ended, and I said, that was remarkable. And I'm okay that I'm not a part of it.
Really?
Yes, because I had a very specific goal in mind. So having worked with the creative team previously, I was hired as a vacation swing, which is a different type of swing to a universal swing. A vacation swing is much more like a substitute teacher. Hey, we need you here for this many weeks, and you're only paid for the weeks you're there. Universal swing, I'm in a full, like a 6-month or a year contract, and I'm getting paid whether I'm on stage or not.
And that's a very, in the theater world, that's a very unique and unusual, somewhat unusual opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Universal swings, there aren't very many shows that have the success to require them, because it's very specific to the show having a union contract to be able to hire union members, because I'm a part of the Actors Equity Association union. And so for a show to be successful enough to have multiple productions running on a similar union contract at the same time is very, very rare. I keep trying to find exact numbers, and I've only come up with 4 or 5 shows that have ever had this position. So that being said, when I was hired with In the Heights, I was taught the show by a dance captain, and Andy Blankenbuehler, the choreographer, the way he works and the way he truly choreographs as an actor, because it is really mostly about the intention of the movement you're doing, not so much about the step that you're doing. Yes, you have to know what the step is, but if you don't know why you're doing the step, what you're doing doesn't matter, and it's not going to propel the story forward. And that is something that reverberates and resonates in my spirit so profoundly, and I love his work. And so when I was aware and available for any sort of audition for Hamilton, they were looking for swings. And my concern was that I would, again, be taught the show by a dance captain. Not to say that a dance captain is not qualified. They're remarkable. I've been a dance captain in a show before, but I knew I wanted the experience of learning from him to hear what he had to say about the movements he had created, so I could fully understand all of their context. And I mean, when you're teaching someone, when a dance captain is putting a new person into an existing show, time is of the essence.
Yeah.
And
right.
as much as you want to give them all of the information you know and have to give them, you can't.
There's just not time, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm not auditioning for this show at this time. And then a year went by, maybe a year and a half, and I had very specific financial goals. And I knew that they were going to be casting a new production of the show, which would go sit down in Chicago. So my thought was, I'll audition for this show. It might get me the goal of learning the show with Andy or from Andy. But what it will also offer me is financial stability. And I would love to be in New York in the Broadway show because that's where I live and that is home. But if they offer me the Chicago company, I'll say yes to a year. I'll make my money and then I'll evaluate what I want to do after that year runs out. So that's what I was thinking going into my audition for Hamilton. I was very nervous because that was like, this is the golden ticket. And if I don't grab this golden ticket now, I don't know what the next step is going to be.
Now, when you say this is the golden ticket, it's the golden ticket to what sounds like you were talking about, both working with this particular person in this way, but also meeting some of your financial goals too. And I wonder how many of your contemporaries or colleagues would have thought about this in the same way. I think about aspiring or, again, I'm thinking in the more stereotypical way of, people who have, starry-eyed dreams of being on the Broadway stage and all they care about is, that the ego is more present in that dream. I'm not hearing an ego here in the same way. I'm hearing a desire to learn from a soulful place and also a desire to create a foundation in your life and being able to leverage your talent and your work and your craft to help you make that happen.
Thank you. Another piece of that is the way I have defined success for myself for a long time. And I've thought a lot, I've tried to figure out the genesis of this definition and I haven't figured it out yet. So some things they just are, you may never know how they started. But for me, an answer that I came up with probably during the time I was on cruise ships, especially when people are like, oh my gosh, do you plan on working on Broadway? Or like, what are your goals? What's the ultimate dream role for you? And I had, pretty stereotypical answers like, oh, I would love to have a role created for me and I'd love to be on Broadway. And then I just thought those don't resonate with me. And so the answer that I landed on and have stayed with is, for me, success is being able to do the thing I love and get paid to do it. For the last 25 years, it's been performing, singing, and dancing. That is shifting. So for me, if the core of my success does not involve me doing the thing I love and getting paid to do it, I'm not doing it. I don't think I could do it and be genuinely happy and present in the way that I know I can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. So you passed the bar exam.
Yes, I passed the bar exam and
you won your case in court.
I'll give you the very abridged audition version, story. So my first audition was on a Thursday afternoon. I had a call back on a Sunday morning, 3 days later. And I went in and sang a song I'd already prepared but then they taught me a song from the show on the spot. And then the next day on Monday, I went in and danced again, was recorded. I left that session at say 10 o'clock, 9:45, 10 o'clock. Was home by 10:30. At 11:30, my agent called me saying I was being offered a position of Universal Swing and I would start rehearsals the next day. So Thursday was the first audition and Tuesday was my first day of rehearsal.
Whoa. I hope you were pinching yourself at that point.
I was waiting for the contract. I am a firm believer. I wait until either something is signed or I'm actually in the space. Mm-hmm. But when I got the call from my agent, I screamed with joy. I had told my mom. She was the only person, her and my current roommate at the time. I told both of them. And I called, she said, should I tell your sisters? And this was before I was auditioning. I was like, I'm going to audition for Hamilton this week. And she's like, should I tell your sisters? I said, no, like wait until I give you an answer either way. So when I found out, I called her, told her to call. Like we got my other sisters on the phone and I said, well, I have some good news. And one of them jokingly said, did you win the lottery? I said, well, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really remarkable. It honestly was remarkable. And then what was even more impactful from that was that when I decided to, post it on Facebook, because that's what I was using primarily at the time, I made the post in the evening before I went to bed. Then I turned off my computer and didn't check my email or didn't check messages until the next morning before I went to rehearsals. And I had so many comments, like actual comments of love and support from people throughout my life. And I read through a fraction of them and it brought me to tears. I cried for 5 minutes just out of appreciation. And there's something, I think it's very seldom in our living lives that we are able to understand and really experience how the people in our lives support us.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably one of the biggest moments that I could tangibly see the support and encouragement and love that existed in my life from those closest to me to those who I may have worked with a couple of years ago. And it was so powerful. I wrote down a lot of like the ones that really touched my heart. I actually went back later and wrote them down in a journal so I would never forget.
Oh, nice. Nice. Wow. And so you were able to, I mean, if not for a decision you made, I'm guessing sometime in the last year or so, you would still be with Hamilton right now.
Well, I don't know. And the reason that I say I don't know is because there's been something growing and seeking light and space within me for the past 12 years. And part of me thinks that being in Hamilton is a step in that direction, even though the direction is changing course ever so slightly. Like it's going from performing in musical theater to public speaking and creating this course and workshop to educate theater professionals on what it means to be an understudy or a swing and ways to create for themselves.
I'm curious about your book, Becoming Magic. I'm curious about the title Soldier of Love, if those are related to one another or they're totally separate. I would love to hear about your public speaking and where you're headed with that. Please speak to all of those in whatever order you want.
Well, so Soldier of Love leads to public speaking, which leads to the books. So
Great.
Soldier of Love, the spirit of it is the best way I'm choosing. I've never described it in this way, but the spirit of Soldier of Love was born in a blog post that I wrote probably 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was rereading all of these entries to figure out what title would go best for the entries. And in one of them, I was like, and at this point I was talking about Soldier of Love. And I was like, oh my gosh, here's the seed. This is the spirit of it. And so it had developed without me purposely moving in a direction that it currently is. But Soldier of Love in its current form as the phrase came from my fear and knowledge of seeing fear around me. And specifically, it was the 2016 election, and just hearing conversations, and there was just so much fear and anger. And that was a space I used to live in for many different reasons. You know, as we mentioned in my intro bio, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And up until I was 30 years old, I operated in the world from a place of fear, even in my most confident of spaces. I was afraid of being vulnerable. I was afraid of men specifically, wanting to take advantage of me or wanting to harm me. And through a lot of therapy, I found a lot of peace with that. And that's like a whole other conversation we could have. But if you buy the book, you'll learn more than you are going to learn in this conversation.
Great. Well, we certainly will have links to the book in the show notes.
Right.
But that's helpful to have that in context.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so you're welcome. And so with Soldier of Love, it took its form in an Instagram post. And I said in that post, I know that I will never be able to keep anyone from feeling fear. Like, I can't do that. No one can do that for another person. So, but what I can offer you and what I can do is offer you and show you love. And so it went from just me, in a sense, vowing that whatever I post on social media is going to be uplifting, positive, thought-provoking, humorous. It won't be nasty or snide or negative. Even if it's uncomfortable, it's like I'm offering my perspective on this thing that could be uncomfortable for people to talk about, versus pointing a finger or whatever that is. Like, there's an accountability that I wanted to have for the energy I was putting into the world, because I was seeing and experiencing so many people taking no accountability for what they were putting into the world.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah. And so that's actually, it's my signature, and it's not just a signature because it seems catchy and it's nice and it's cool. It's because something that I believe that I take responsibility for the energy I put into this world. And I think if more of us had that thought in our minds, especially in the moments where we feel harmed, where we feel fear, where we feel inferior, it would make our responses so much different, and we could work towards each other instead of further away. Or I just think it seems so simple and so Pollyanna or so ridiculous. Like, oh, if I just, take responsibility for the energy I put into this world, everything will be great. But simple example, hold a door for someone, they walk out and don't acknowledge you. You could yell at them, you could cuss at them. What we don't realize is we don't know what they're thinking. Like, they could be thinking about anything, and the fact that they did not acknowledge you is not a cut against who you are as a person.
Right.
It's more of an insight to what they might be dealing with. And it's a lot harder to offer grace to someone else than it is to just be pissed and react, thinking from a place of unjust ego.
Yep. I love that. I can appreciate that. It's true. I think that if we could just pause ourselves for even a half a second and just stop ourselves from being mind readers, right? Mm-hmm. And saying, oh, that person, they are this and that, when in fact, they are probably none of that or unlikely to be any of that. And we just come up with all these conclusions and assumptions about what we think is going on. And then we get into, a tirade over it or all pissed off when in fact, we've just made up a whole story and put ourselves in a negative state over it.
Yes. And there are so many pieces to Soldier of Love, but the core of it that I've really found clarity in, and I keep honing in on with Soldier of Love, is it's us trusting that the love we have for ourselves is enough. When we don't trust that, we are so susceptible to everything else that is going to feed us lies and push on our insecurities and our fears. And the way each of us finds that is different, is going to be different. For me, Absolutely. It was therapy. For me, therapy was the space where I discovered me loving myself, who I am. I have overcome so many hardships and struggles and terrifying events. And at the base of all of that, something inside of me allowed me to survive it, to keep going, to keep wanting to live, and not only just live, but live joyfully and live from a place of love.
Tell me about the public speaking that you're and your TEDx talk.
They are related. So my TEDx talk was titled Soldier of Love, My Survivor Journey.
Okay.
And it touches briefly on the sexual abuse I experienced at the age of 8 and then also 14. But then it kind of jumps forward to say, it wasn't until I was in my 20s and started to be in relationships with men that I was understanding the effect of that abuse on my life. For the past 12 years, I've been speaking as an advocate for survivors, which is what found me to being on the advisory council for the Office of Victim Services here in New York.
Right.
And so that's a piece of it, is advocacy. And then, this theater education, I want to, public speaking to offer the insight I have in theater, but also just life, the life that I've lived that also informs what I've been able to do in theater. So I'm currently focusing on theater education because there's a true deficit in the education system for performers, specifically those who will eventually become swings or understudies in their career. Mm-hmm. There is no formal curriculum or training that is being taught. And myself and hundreds of other swings that do this job, and I want to share my experience broadly of 25 years in musical theater, but specifically, I've been a swing for 2 huge Broadway shows for multiple years, have been one of the first for those shows to be that position. And I've done it very well. And I've come out not only with minimal physical injuries, but also have, been able to make a living and to do what I need to do for myself and speak up for myself, because I'm the kind of person that, again, back to my signature, I take responsibility for the energy I put into this world. Mm-hmm. Whatever success I'm going to have, I want to be as responsible with that as possible.
We don't always know what our impact is because people don't always voice that. So, well, Antuan Magic Raimone, this has been amazing, delightful, and insightful.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so, so much for sharing your story and your life with us. And I wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Antuan Magic Raimone. It was so interesting to speak with him about his personal and professional transitions. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at tammygoolerloeb.com. Just look for episode 179. Are you thinking about what your next professional move might be? Maybe you're feeling just a little stuck. I encourage you to pick up my new book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon Worldwide, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and your local public library. If you are inspired by this episode with Antuan, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate reading your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygoolerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. I would love to hear how things are going for you. Feel free to drop me a line. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.